My name My name My name was Michael. It was a good name, and it was a name I tried to live up to for 40 years. I'm making this video today in an effort to show the steps and demonstrate the steps that I went through to get to my name, but also to help you perhaps in your transition journey, or if you have a friend or family member going through transition, to help you understand what they're going through as they work through different names, or are asking you not to call them their assigned name at birth. If that sounds like something you might gain value from, stick around and let's get at it. Hi, my name is Kate Madden and I live in Vancouver, BC. I try to make videos that help people understand the transition journey, or specifically trans people in their 30s, 40s, and 50s. I'm seeking to create resources that I didn't feel I had access to 2.5 years ago when I started my transition. I want to lay down some ground rules first. In the trans community, we call our assigned name at birth our dead name. I am way outside every norm of the trans community right now by having disclosed my dead name. Don't ever call me by that name. Here are some general rules in the trans community surrounding dead names that I want to share with you. And these are very hard and fast rules. Typically, that if you violate any of them, you're going to upset the trans person in your life. If you know the trans person's birth name, don't call them it. You don't want to mention the birth name either. So for example, let's say you're at a party and you bump into somebody and it turns out you mutually know this trans person. Don't say, oh yeah, I knew Kate when she was, or I knew Joe when he was. That's not allyship. That's not even friendship. And it's a bullshit move that is, when it gets back to the trans person, is going to hurt them. I know it has hurt me the couple of times that it's happened to me. So, don't call them it, don't mention it, don't even think about it. Like, just, their name is their name. Like, the name they want to be called by is the name they're asking you to call them. And you just need to respect that. Like, they're not asking you for the moon. They're just saying, please call me whatever name it is that they're asking to be called by. In a lot of my videos, I've talked about how I don't speak for the trans community, and I certainly don't. However, I think on this matter, it is a pretty general and universal rule regarding the name. So I just want to make that very clear from the outset regarding the use of the dead name and why it hurts us so much. In terms of my story, in terms of the steps that I went through, I go by Kate. My full name is Catherine Madden, and I go by Kate because it's a name that I grew comfortable with online. In the late 90s, early 2000s, there was a website that dealt with gender transformation, forced feminization, and when you consider that in mass media at the time, you really only had these caricatures of trans people like on Jerry Springer, or as cheap laughs on TV or in movies. There weren't a lot of options, and so I wrote a story on the website. My then girlfriend had a name as well, her middle name, and what I did was I used Katie, and then I used her middle name, and it was a collaborative effort at the time. She proofread and kind of edited the story, and I was really proud that I had published something online that thousands and thousands of people have read. And ultimately, the story really was my dream, my goal of being able to transition in that relationship, and just what that would have been like. I didn't obviously transition until 20 years later, or almost 20 years later, But it was a name that never really left. And throughout the multiple different transition attempts, it was a name that I always came back to. You know, like I talked to my mom, for example, a couple of years ago when I was trying to figure out a name. The name she would have picked for me when in 1977, if I had been born a girl, was McKenna. And what's funny is I have never heard that name ever. I've never met anyone named McKenna. And the next day, I met two different teenagers, like one at the movie theater and somewhere else, I can't quite recall where, but both names McKenna. So, you know, I wondered if the universe was speaking to me that day, but it didn't feel right. I talked to my sisters. So I have my younger sister Siobhan, my older sister Selena, and my dad had a thing for Irish names. And that kind of left me with Sinead, really. And I did not really, I wasn't feeling Sinead. And so I kept going back to Catherine. And what I had previously was, because I had all these different personas, and really the personas were just erected barriers of self-protection, you know, to keep me safe in the closet and to not have to actually disclose who I really was. And so I had, you know, my family calling me Michael, or friends who have known me forever. I was Michael. But professionally, I had, you know, become a very successful salesperson. You know, I had a lot of success in the professional world, the business world, and so what I found was that I preferred people who weren't in my family or in that kind of that first circle. I preferred that they called me Mike. And so I had that Michael and Mike thing going on. And what I liked about Catherine was that I thought it was something I could do with that name as well, where I could have my family and close friends calling me Catherine, and I can have everyone else calling me Kate. And that was how I came to Kate. And what I found was that I just became more comfortable with people calling me Kate. I do have a few people in my life who call me Catherine. I do love it. Don't stop. It is my name. But I found that I didn't have to erect any barriers of self-protection and hide now that I was authentic. And so I'm Kate Madden. I live in Vancouver, BC. And I'm really making this video just to help people understand the whole process behind this. And so I've talked about these barriers before in other videos, and that internalized transphobia that does exist. Like, how could I be Catherine? How could I possibly get to that point? How could I transition? You know, I had this really comfortable middle-class life, beautiful house, kids, gorgeous wife, and how could I possibly get from Mike to Kate? And I started my transition kind of just jumping out of the airplane. I couldn't live anymore. And the pain got so great that I did get to that point where it was either I was going to kill myself choosing death, or because I couldn't possibly go on, or I had to somehow figure out how to choose life. And choosing life meant jumping out of the airplane with no parachute and figuring out how to put it on the way down, and choosing life. And my process was that I came out at work, I started HRT, and through this, I'd never even met a trans person, or rather, I'd met a couple of friends of friends who were trans, but I'd never reached out to the community. I wasn't super active online. You know, I certainly wasn't looking at sexualized stories online anymore. You know, it was real, it wasn't a fantasy. And so through this whole process of coming out, I knew I had to change my name at some point, but I didn't really know how to do it. There was a local organization in Calgary called Skipping Stone Foundation. They work with gender and sexually diverse youth, supporting them and their families, helping them with resources, transition resources, and that sort of thing. But they also support adults in the community as well. And one of the things that they do is they run name change clinics through the province. I think it's in Edmonton, Red Deer, Calgary Medicine Hat last time I looked online, but check them out. I'll put a link in the description below. They really are a fantastic organization. Katie Lang was there a couple weeks ago. So fantastic organization. I do miss them being 1,000 kilometers away now. But it was the first time that I'd been in a room with more than one other trans person. There was 3 or 4. And they were helping people with the paperwork and the notarization of the paperwork for the name changes. So they made it easy to proceed. And you know, while you're transitioning, there really are a lot of exit ramps. And these exit ramps, as you go through the process of transitioning, you might figure out that you're not actually trans, or you're non-binary, or you need to detransition, or whatever. And I've seen that all happen with people I know. And it's all designed really to help you get to the place where you understand yourself better. And so I think one of those exit ramps is, do I change my name? Or when do I change my name? Because it's a hassle, administratively, to do that. And so Skipping Stone kind of took a bit of the burden off and helped me with that. And so I was able to commit to Catherine. Really, I dove in on that. I changed my middle name as well. Previously I'd had my dad's mom's maiden name as my middle name. And, I've talked before about being Scottish and, having that background. But my mom was Croatian, and I also wanted to honor that background. And so I chose my mom's maiden name as my new middle name. I took that, and it meant several trips to the registry to get all the different things. So you start in Alberta, where I lived at the time. You start with your name change, you get your driver's license and the gender marker done at the same time. And then I had to go back once I received the driver's license to do my healthcare card. And then I came back, and then because I was born here in British Columbia, I had to then get a letter from my psychologist, and then also send that off to Kelowna and receive my birth certificate. I also happened to travel internationally a few months later, and I called up Canadian Border Services, and they said, well, Michael doesn't exist anymore, so you need to do your passport as well. I didn't really have the $142 at the time, and that I was just about to leave for Europe. I got the passport done. And that felt really like the final piece of my transition being completed, is doing my passport. That is until I relocated back to BC, and I had to jump through some hoops for my BC healthcare card, my BC driver's license, because they still had all the old information. So it was kind of an odd sensation, 18 months later, to be redoing the administrative forms here in British Columbia. But the people at ICBC were actually really great about it. And it only took about 20 minutes. So super easy, super fast. What I haven't done is correct my British passport, which still says European Union. I'm gonna wait and see what happens with Scotland, and maybe I'll have a Scottish passport in a couple of years, so we'll see. I do like that it's a European passport, and I understand why the people of England decided to vote for Brexit, but I think the people of Scotland have a different opinion based on everything I'm seeing online and with family members. A frustrating part about the trans experience, 100%, is the waiting and the jumping through hoops that you do need to do, both from a medical perspective and from an administrative perspective. There are some jurisdictions in North America where you need to go to court and you need to have a judge approve your name change. I'm fortunate to live in Canada and to live in jurisdictions where they allow self-identification. I think 9 years ago in Alberta, to change your gender marker, you had to actually go, you actually couldn't do it until after you had had gender confirmation surgery. And so, think of what that meant to all the non-binary people, or people who, chose not to pursue bottom surgery. And there are people who do that. And so I'm very grateful to those who came before and who helped make it so easy, really, in retrospect, for me and for those of us in Canada, in British Columbia, Alberta, Ontario, and elsewhere, so that we could live our best life. And thank you for that. A difficult moment came soon after I received my updated driver's license. And my 9-year-old, he was then 7, found my driver's license, had it on the counter, and he was cleaning. And I was still presenting mail to the kids for the first kind of 6 months or so after separation, basically until it became impossible physically, like, to hide parts of my body. And so my son found my driver's license, or saw my driver's license, and he saw the F, he saw the new name. And they had seen the name like on the PlayStation or on the computer. To be honest, I can't recall if they understood that my name was at that point Catherine, but they had seen it and they weren't asking any questions. And so his comment was, "Why do I feel like I have 2 moms now?" So I called my former spouse and told her, gave her the heads up what had happened. We had a pretty pointed conversation about the incident. And what we did is we decided to go for ice cream with him, and we went to Dairy Queen and sat him down, and the two of us explained it together. And, you know, his only question really was, when did I get my ice cream? So he was really cool about the whole thing, and in time, you know, I kind of called him my pronoun police because he would correct people, and I got a bill in the mail from the phone company, and he's like, what is this? Why are they still calling you that? And I had to explain to him how difficult it had been to try to change my name with them, and I had just gotten to the point where I gave up. It is exhausting. Like, you know, some companies are easier to deal with than others, and some have caught up, some haven't. One of the things that I have really struggled with is people who don't seem to want to use my name, who still will call me when they're talking to other people. Like, they will call me Catherine or Kate to my face, but when they're talking to other people, they will call me Michael or Mike or Kate Mike or Catherine Michael, some combination thereof. And that's really hurtful. And, you know, to my point earlier, it's not allyship, it's not friendship. And I wish there was a way to just cut these people out of my life, but they're either family or former family. And at a certain point, like, I just don't need to engage. And, you know, it says more about them than it does about me, really. I think this is a common experience. You know, it's just something that we have to deal with as trans people. In terms of my immediate family, it's been fantastic. There's been no issues. Even my mom, you know, who's in a home, and I'm not sure quite always mentally present. You know, it took her a little bit, but you know, a year and a half later, she genders me correctly, introduces me as her daughter, and calls me Kate 100% of the time. So I've been pretty lucky that way. There does come a point in your transition where there's enough time that's passed, enough distance between when you change your name, either legally or socially. Some of us choose not to change our name legally, where it really does become a dead name, where you're not that person anymore. Both in terms of, you know, the authenticity that you've arrived at, and just, you know, in terms of responding to the name. And, you know, short of a mom calling out after her kid for Michael, I don't react when I hear someone yelling for their friend or their spouse or what have you. I do find it funny though when I do hear a mom calling after her kid. That's really just instilled in me deeply, and I just hear my own mom calling after me. I guess I'm at a point where I can smile about it. It doesn't bother me, but it is my dead name, and it's not something that I respond to at all now. When somebody does use my dead name, you know, they slip up, it's an accident, you know, it does hurt. And then it leads me down a rabbit hole of, well, you know, do they even see me as a woman? Like, what do they talk, how do they talk about me in private? Or when I'm not around? Or like, it's just this kind of spiral that I go into. That's just something that we all seem to have to deal with. There's a point in transition where you do come to grieve your old life, or you need to put that name to rest. And while I'm not Michael anymore, I am all that plus more. I'm not holding back energy or attention where before, because of the gender identity disorder, the dysphoria in my head, that was a constant car crash. I wasn't always fully present, and I was just trying to maintain some semblance of normativity in a world that really demanded compulsory heterosexuality and cisgender lifestyle. But I did make a mistake early in transition where I said Michael was dead. I think that was a result of the fear that I was experiencing, the massive fear from a personal, professional, social level. Losing my family, losing my marriage, losing my job, and it was all building up on me. And what I realize now, just in terms of being my full authentic self, is that I dug the grave, but there's no body to put in it. And we stood at that grave, all of us. And in that fear, that internalized transphobia that we were all dealing with, whether you know, seeing my former spouse and children as victims of my selfishness, or seeing myself as selfish, we weren't being open to the love that could have possibly existed. And that was a mistake I made, and I introduced that fear into the equation by responding from a place of fear. Eventually, though, I was able to come to a place of peace, and I've learned to just accept that those were the things that I needed to do to survive, really, and to forgive myself for that. And I don't need to ask myself why I did these things anymore, or why I hid for so long, or it just was what I needed to do to survive. And I'm here now, and I can step into that authenticity and begin to live life fully, with peace, with happiness, and with love. One thing I do struggle with, and I've bumped into this professionally, I've bumped into this personally, is that I get judged by values that I no longer align with. I was a super Catholic, super uptight, very rigid person prior to transition. And I think in moments of weakness, I can still lean on the rigidity, but I've learned really to become more flexible, more empathetic, to understand situations more. I think just being introduced to intersectional feminism has really blown my worldview wide open. It's hard, yeah, to be held to account at a level that that's not you anymore. You're not there. And I imagine that just based on anecdotal conversations I've had with other trans people, both assigned male at birth and assigned female at birth, that it's a pretty common experience. But in time, your life becomes normal and boring and mundane, just like everybody else. And it's a wonderful feeling to just be normal. You're in a social setting, a professional setting, you reach your hand out, hi, I'm Catherine, or I'm Kate. When you order your drink at Starbucks, you give your name, the bills come in your name. I find the normalcy energizing. Finally, this is my life. Unquestionably, things are harder now, without a doubt. I am more stressed now. I do miss the comfort that Michael had in his life. There is peace in my life now, though, that transition brought me, stepping into the authenticity of being myself as Catherine, fully, as Kate has brought, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Thank you for watching. I hope you learned something or gained some value from this video. If you haven't had a chance, please like and subscribe. Feel free to share. And here's to life.